The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Thursday, and I don't know about the rest of you, but there's a great deal of excitement in the air. There's a lot that's getting ready to happen for April Autism Awareness Month, and as Lisa Ackerman said the other day, Autism Action Month. So a whole bunch of events. My calendar is starting to fill up, and very excited about that. It is a time of year that I always look forward to. It is a bittersweet time because on the one hand, we want to bring attention to autism, and there are a whole bunch of events and there's a whole bunch of attention, but it reminds us of how much attention we really need on this subject, and that it takes ever so much more than a month and ever so much more time than we end up having. I was talking to a friend recently, and she said, you know, why is it that autism affects more children than pediatric AIDS, diabetes, and cancer all together, and yet it doesn't seem like it gets the amount of attention that those three things get? And I said, you know, I do think that it's a thing that's shifting, and more people are talking about it, of course, but it is so intensive, and there is so much still misinformation around it. When I have friends who, heaven forbid, you know, they've had something happen medically with their child, when somebody says, oh, my child has diabetes, the rest of the family kind of understands what that means, and they rally around. And while the family themselves don't have time to go advocate about diabetes, perhaps the rest of the family do. And with autism, we still have to get over that hump of getting the family to understand what's happening so that they can be the people who go out and support. One of the things that I loved that the Wrights, who founded Autism Speaks, said was, you know, their grandson was diagnosed with autism, and they founded Autism Speaks because they said the grandparents need to step up. The families are too busy. They are too busy to get done what needs to happen legislatively and in terms of research and raising the money, so the grandparents need to step up. And I think it goes beyond that. The whole family has to step up and get the word out and make sure that things get done. There are a bunch of events that happen in the month of April, and I encourage you to get to as many of them as you can without making yourself crazy, right? But I encourage you, when you go to these events, to take other people with you. Take the members of the family that don't understand, that don't get it, that aren't completely on board. It may seem like it's an errand that will create more havoc, but perhaps they will start to get it. You know, the Los Angeles Walk for Autism is happening on April 20th, and we will be going to that event to cover it. And it was a life-changing event for me to see that event and see all the different families that were there. And in the past, on certain years, I brought other people with me, and they have said afterwards, wow, I didn't really get it before. I get it in a better way now. So I encourage you, take other people with you. Autism awareness starts very close to home, right? But in any case, we're going to be with you live for the next 2 hours talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective, how we can all be more effective and efficient, whether you're a parent, teacher, practitioner working with an individual on the autism spectrum, or you yourself are on the autism spectrum. We want to help hook you up with information that will help you to do the kinds of things that you're interested in doing. Having said that, I want to remind you that the entire show is meant to be interactive. Emily's going to cycle through some of the different ways that you can get a hold of us here and some of the different ways that you can watch the show. But there is only one way to watch the show live, and that is at www.autism-live.com. The thing that I couldn't manage to say yesterday, I must have said it 13 different ways, but it is www.autism-live.com. It's that thing sometimes when you say your phone number and you go, that's not right. I say that and all the time. It's not right. What did I just say? That can't possibly be right. But that is the address. When you go there, there's a lovely desktop. When we're live, and we are live 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, you will see that there's a box that says questions we're answering right now. And when you put your cursor there and you type and hit enter, it shows up magically right here on my screen. I have the opportunity to interact with you, and I also have the opportunity to share what you have written with some of the people that we have sitting next to me, the various different people. And we have two pretty amazing people that are going to be with us live, and perhaps one via Skype a little later in the show. So I always like to remind you at the top of the show that while I sit here and hold down the fort with this desk, I am not an expert in autism. I am not an expert in ABA therapy, which we talk a great deal about. I'm not a behaviorist. I'm certainly not a board-certified behavior analyst. I am a former teacher, and I am a parent. And my son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. He's now 9.5. He's in completely included 4th grade and doing really well. And I know that that is as a result of getting the right help and support at the right time, because people who were wiser than me pointed me in the directions. I always like to say, if it had been left up to me and to my bank account, I shudder to think where we would have been, because I wouldn't have known what to do, and I certainly couldn't have paid for it. So I hope that if you're here, that you will ask us the questions that you specifically need. All of our kids are different. All of our circumstances are different. And I am here to help and support you to pay forward what was given to me, which was free information. And there are so many other people you don't get to see that are part of this show that are also committed to making sure that you get good information that will help you to do the kinds of things that you want and feel you need to do. So, all of that having been said, we like to start every morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is the time of day when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym, and try to make sense out of what these words mean. The jargon is intensive on this journey, and it can sink your battleship if you're not paying attention. I would like to be very honest about the fact that in the beginning I was militant about the fact that I was not going to participate in the jargon. And I would go to meetings and say, if you can't explain this in terms that anybody would know, blah, 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 blah. And what I realized over a period of time was that wasn't helping my child. And so one of the things I tell parents early on, make friends with the jargon. Don't get in an argument with the jargon. It's not time well spent, right? And don't get in an argument with the expert who doesn't know how to make the jargon user-friendly. Tune in here. We take on one word, one phrase, one acronym every day, and hopefully over time you get together a glossary in your head of what these terms mean. So today's term, which is one of those weird, wonky terms that I had never heard of before autism came to live in my house, stereotypy. It's the most bizarre term that I had ever heard. And we will hear sometimes people using improper words instead of stereotypy. You'll hear people talking about stimming, and you'll hear people talking about self-stimulatory behavior. So let's take a look at what stereotypy means and why it's the right term to use. So our actual definition is repetitive or ritualistic behavior, sometimes referred to as self-stimulatory behavior or stimming. I remember the first time that before we started ABA, what was given to us by the state was that early intervention where we would go to a center and my child would have OT and he would have speech, and then he would have sort of this group center time, and he would do a craft, and it was the seventh ring of hell because my child would scream for most of it. But in any case, he was doing all these different things, right? He was flapping his hands and lining things up. And one of the therapist said, I said, why is he doing that? And she said, oh, well, it's just, it's a stim. And I said, a stim? What, are you saying a stem? A stim? I don't hear so good. What are you saying? She says, a stim. And I said, okay, what does that mean? And she goes, oh, well, I think it stands for, and she was a very young girl. And she said, oh, it's stimming. It's stimming, not helpful. So then I went to the therapist over her and they said, oh, it stands for self-stimulatory behavior. And I said, self-stimulatory? And they said, yeah, he's doing it to stimulate himself, except that a lot of times our kids engage in these behaviors not to stimulate themselves, although sometimes it is to stimulate themselves. Sometimes it's to calm themselves. So that's why, you can say stimming, but understand that what we're really talking about is stereotypy. So let's look at our working definition of stereotypy. Behaviors that are done repetitively. For example, body rocking, hand flapping, lining up toys, movie talk. Those things that our kids do that, and they use the term repetitive and ritualistic. It's one whole section of the autism diagnostic criteria. Things that our kids do, and sometimes it's that repetitive stuff where the child who will, open and close the door 300 times. The child who spins the plate. Or Temple Grandin talked on the show about how there was a metal disc that was on the end of her bed, and she would sit and spin it her mother would let her spin it an hour a day. There are those things that they seem weird and bizarre, but there is an element about them. And I asked Temple, I said, Temple, do you remember why you would spin the disc? And she said, yeah, because it was fascinating. And she said, and I would, do it at different speeds. And I like to watch the way the light hit it when it went at different speeds. And how much oomph I put into it to see how fast it would go. And I know for my son, just the other day, I mentioned this on the show, that I was cutting his fingernails and he couldn't quite sit still. It was making him nervous, right? And I said to him, you got to sit still. I don't want to clip you by accident. And so he said, can I do this? And he hadn't flapped his hand in forever. And I said, why do you want to do that? And he goes, well, because it gives me something to do while you're doing this and it won't affect you. And I said, but yeah, what is it about this? And he said, oh, because it keeps me busy. I'm looking at it. It's kind of fun. It's a thing to do. And if you think about it, we all have things that are like this. And it's a way of stimulating yourself sometimes, right? Keep yourself awake and aware and interested. But it's also a way to soothe, to self-soothe. So when we say stimming, it presumes that it always stimulates us. That's why the proper term is stereotypy. My son still engages in vocal stereotypy, that he makes noises. It's nowhere near what it was when he was little, and he does have the ability to turn it on and off now. But he makes little R2-D2 noises. He'll go, and he'll hum and make all these little noises. And sometimes you ask him something and he'll do a little doop, doop, doop noise, right? And it used to, after a while, it drove me batty. But we were able to work on that with him. So he is at the point now when he can do it for a set amount of time or in appropriate places and turn it off. So when he's taking a math test, he's not sitting next to another student and engaging in that vocal stereotypy. So an interesting area. And it's always a personal choice for the individual and for the parents and caretakers of the individual of how much do you allow the person to engage in stereotypy. And as I mentioned, Temple Grandin's mom told her, you can do it an hour a day in your bedroom. That's it. And when that's over, it's over. And she mentioned that she felt that it was important to give them some time. I believe for my son, I didn't want to take away all of his vocal stereotypy because sometimes it's humming and sometimes I have appreciation of the fact that he can make those high noises and do the R2-D2 things. And I kept thinking about, the actor who was in the Police Academy movies that does all the little sound effects of like helicopters and things like that. And I figured that when he was a child, he probably drove his mother crazy too. And now he has a career from it. And I didn't want to completely stifle it. I but I really wanted him to have control over when he did it and the ability to shut it off when it was not appropriate. So I think it's really a personal choice for the parents. I think it's a personal choice for the people who are engaging in it. But that is what it's called, stereotopy. Okay. And it could have many different functions. It could be stimulatory, it could be soothing, it could be a lot of other things. So we don't want to assume. All right, we always have a question of the day for you. And our question today, we've been talking about challenging behaviors this week, but if you could change one of your child's behaviors, what would it be? This is that sort of wish list moment, right? When you look at your child, and by the way, you can do this for yourself as well. If there was one behavior that you could change in yourself or one behavior that you could change in your child, what would it be? I've mentioned before on the show that when we first did our parent training before we started ABA therapy in the state of California, you can apply for and get funding for ABA therapy through the regional center. Of course, this was well before there was insurance, but the regional center still exists. And if you were going to get the ABA in your home, there were a lot of hoops that you had to jump through in order to get that level of funding. And one of the many hoops was to do 16 hours of parent training in person. We were talking yesterday about the telehealth bill, which would allow you to do it at home. But my husband and I, the logistics of us getting 16 hours together away from our child, let's talk about that. But when we went in, it ended up being really beneficial. We went in and the first thing that the doctor who was leading the group said was, okay, let's make a list of the behaviors that you'd like to change in your child. And I've said before, it was like being on a game show. My husband and I sat there and we were like, oh my gosh, if we could, and we loved playing the game, if we could, I don't know that we really believe that you could change it, but if we could, what would we change? And on that day, the two big heavy hitters were getting him to sleep at a reasonable time and getting him to stop self-injurious behavior. And it really was a battle for me, but ultimately what we decided was that if he didn't start sleeping, I wasn't going to be equipped to deal with the self-injurious behavior. And so we were supposed to make a list of 5 things, then narrow it down to 2, and then give the one thing that really had to change to the doctor who was going to help us intervene to make that thing different. And he did. Within a week, my child was going to sleep at an appropriate time. And it was like somebody giving me my life back. And you want to talk about having buy-in. And I really believe that that's why he started it that way, was that once we saw, okay, this huge thing that had been wrecking our lives. And within a week, it was fixed. I was like, this is the most amazing thing on the face of the planet. How do we learn more? Right? I severely had buy-in and have continued to have buy-in ever since then. So I ask you, let's dream a little, because I firmly believe that whatever it is that you say, this is the behavior that's got to change, we can change it. It might take some work and it might get really uncomfortable before it gets better. But I'm here to tell you that when you change those behaviors, it's a gift to you. It's a gift to your child. My child was much happier going to sleep before 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was a better person. I was in a scary place. Okay, so that is our question. We'll check in a little bit later with you on Facebook to see what you guys wrote in for that. And we always have a topic of the week. Our topic all this week, of course, we've already given it away, but it's challenging behavior. How do we target these challenging behaviors and really make a difference? We want to lessen them or get rid of them altogether, but we've been talking about the fact that there are steps that we can do that with, and one of them being that we have to come up with a replacement behavior. We can't expect that we're just going to eliminate. When I think of those stereotopy behaviors, they happen for a reason, and we have to give the child something to do instead. For my son, when we started to work on his vocal stereotopy, one of the questions, and keep in mind, he was older and he had good receptive language by this point. It wasn't the first thing we targeted by any stretch of the imagination, but one of the things that a therapist asked him, and I remember it very distinctly, he was sitting at the table and he was, I can't even go as high as he can go. And the therapist put his hand on him and said, Jem, you're making these noises. Is it something you can make in your head? And Jem looked at him and he said, yeah. And then Jem went back to doing what he was doing, and his little shoulders were moving, and we knew he was making the noise in his head, but it wasn't coming out of his mouth. He still had the benefit of how this had worked for him without driving everybody else crazy. Woohoo! And, he had to be prompted a lot, and occasionally he still has to be prompted, that I have to say to him, hey, did you know that you're making noises? I didn't know I was making noises. And then I say to him, could you do that in your head? Sure. And that's a much better page than finally getting to the point where I'm like, somebody do something, I'm going to lose my mind. So anyway, we are talking about challenging behavior today, and we've got some very exciting things coming up for you. We have a myth of the day a little bit later on today. In just a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Dr. Adel Najdowski. We call that segment Real Progress with Dr. Adel, and she's going to be talking with us about challenging behavior and how we target it. A little bit later, we'll be breaking it down with Angela Persicke, who is also, both of these women are board-certified behavior analysts. So thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with them, and it's a great opportunity for you. Two really incredible people at the top of their field that if you have questions about challenging behavior, it's a great time for you to write in with your questions. Of course, we never give child-specific advice, but there is a great deal that we can tell you about challenging behavior that will help you, hopefully, to figure out what direction you need to go in to get the help and support that you need. So a very exciting day. As always, we defer to what you guys want to know about, so feel free to write in on the live feature right now. All right, we're going to take a break. We may be joined in just a moment by a special Skype guest. We had somebody who particularly wanted to Skype in with us today, and hopefully we'll be able to connect with her. And I'll tell you more about that when we come back. Stick with us. Currently, in the United States, 1 in 88 children is affected by autism. 1 in 88 means something different when your child is the one. Recovery is possible. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, host of Autism Live, an online show about autism broadcast by CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm also the mother of a child with autism, my beautiful son, Jem. You know our old joke, guess what?
Chicken butt.
Chicken butt. So we're going to take the chickens. But things weren't always so easy. I remember when Jem was first diagnosed with autism. I used to lay awake at night in bed and pray for someone or something that could help us to get our child back. My prayers were answered by Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet and the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD treats autism and other related disorders using the principles of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. It is also recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the U.S. Surgeon General. About a year after we started treatment with CARD, we were able to see tremendous improvement, and we got our child back.
What grade are you in?
Second.
You are a smart cookie, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like school?
Yeah.
Do you have any good friends?
Yeah, Oscar.
Oscar is your best friend?
Yeah.
And my child is just one of thousands to benefit from CARD ABA therapy. Across the nation and around the world, children are making amazing progress and being given the keys to unlock their full potential.
We are extremely grateful for the amazing job CARD has done in helping our daughter. Our daughter today, just in 4 months, I think is a totally different child than when she started with CARD. I kind of see it as, it seems like her brain in a way was asleep, and now that we've gotten so many services, we've seen her wake up.
Did you have some glasses?
Recovery is possible if you take the right steps, if you're willing to put in all the hard work. And 7.5 years, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth every little bit, and CARD's been there with us every step of the way.
I have 2 children with autism. I can't imagine a day without CARD or the therapists. They've been so instrumental in helping us with our kids and shaping their lives and helping us help them.
Thank you, Christina Big Alex.
Thank you, Jackie and Mariana.
We've tried other things before ABA, but the most beneficial thing has been ABA services, and I'd be the first person to tell any newly diagnosed family that you have to contact an ABA provider, and if you're lucky enough to have a card, you're very blessed.
Recovery from autism is absolutely a possibility. We've been recovering children for over 20 years. It's just a matter of identifying the child's medical needs, understanding the child's sensory issues, and then teaching the child all of the skills they need in order to function normally.
We know there's hope for autism. Autism is treatable, and recovery from autism is possible. Welcome back to Autism Live. We have a very special guest joining us via Skype, a young woman who is 19 and on the autism spectrum who wrote into our show yesterday and asked if she could join us via Skype today. So, Cassidy, we welcome you to the show.
Hello.
Hi. And before we start, I just want to know that we have your permission to be showing your picture and to be doing this interview.
Yes.
Okay.
That's fine.
And Cassidy, I'm so thrilled that you wrote into us this morning and asked us if you could be on the show. You asked a question yesterday, and it's not the first time that you've written into the show, that you were the one who wrote in and said that you'd like to be going to college, but that your parents have some concerns about you living in the dorm, right?
Yes.
And I'm curious because I had an opportunity to talk with Dr. Grandpichet about you, and you seem like somebody who has a great deal of computer skills already. You're pretty good at the computer, right?
Yes. I love the internet.
Well, that is a great skill set. I can tell you that so many times we'll have a guest on Skype, and it's a little overwhelming to them, but this was not overwhelming to you at all. You knew exactly what to do. And I'm wondering, how much time do you spend on the computer?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot of time.
Okay. And if you could go to college, if there were a way for you to go to college, what kinds of things would you be interested in studying, Cassidy?
Psychology. I want to work with people on the autism spectrum.
Wow. You've got a beautiful Southern accent there. I'm curious about, you said in your question that you don't drive and that you don't cook. Are there things that you do around the house to help out?
Not really, but I need to work on that some. That's one of the skills that I need to work on, is to help out with my mom, because it is kind of overwhelming for her. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I think I need to help out more. Okay. So that would be great. You're working on it.
Well, technically, you're still a teenager, and teenagers need to be reminded to help out around the house. So you're totally in the neighborhood of all other teenagers there. So, but I'd love to know, Cassidy, when did you know that you were on the autism spectrum?
Well, my mom knew that I have another condition called Turner syndrome, mm-hmm. which occurs only in females. It's a chromosome abnormality. Mm-hmm. And so she knew that I had some characteristics of a girl with Asperger's. Mm-hmm. She looked it up and she came across Asperger's, and she's like, yeah, that's it. That is what she has. It is not Turner syndrome. It's not any of that. She is on the autism spectrum, and we went to a doctor to confirm it, and he did confirm that I had Asperger's syndrome.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was around 17 years old.
So it's just been about 2 years then.
Yes.
And so were you in the room when the doctor said this is Asperger's, or did your mom have to tell you afterwards?
I was in the room.
And did you know what Asperger's meant at that time? Had you and your mom already talked about it?
Well, not really. I didn't really know much about it. I was shocked, but my mom wasn't, because she knew that there was something different about me.
We have so many parents write in and talk about how to tell their teenagers if they're on the autism spectrum. Do you have any advice for them about what was good for you or what could have been better about how you found out?
Well, not really. Just that you're not alone. You're not the only one. And that, sorry.
No, you're doing great, Cassidy.
Thank you so much. But, no, I don't really have anything
That's okay.
to add, but...
When you dream about things that you want to be able to do, what kinds of things interest you?
I like entertainment. Like, I'm like part of Asperger's and being on the autism spectrum is kind of like interests. Like, you have a real interest in stuff. And one of my interests, my main interest is celebrities.
Like, who do you really like? Who's your favorite celebrity?
Miley Cyrus. I really like Miley Cyrus.
Very cool. Did you watch Hannah Montana when you were younger?
Yes, I did.
What do you think of her new haircut?
Oh, I love it.
It's pretty out there, her new haircut.
Yeah.
And who else? Who else are you a big fan of, celebrity-wise?
Jim Parsons from The Big Bang Theory. I love him.
Wonderful. And, you know, a lot of people say that his character in The Big Bang Theory is probably somebody who has Asperger's. Do you look at that character and see that?
I love him so much.
And he puts a very funny spin on it. Do you find that funny?
Yes.
Very cool. Well, Cassidy, I have to say that you're a beautiful, really well-spoken young woman, and we'd like to stay in contact with you to see, when you saw the answer that Dr. Persicke gave yesterday and some of the suggestions that I gave, did anything sound of interest to you? Or was anything helpful?
Yes. I asked you guys about being turned down for SSI disability, and we actually are meeting with a lawyer on Monday.
Great.
My mom is out on Monday as work, so me and her are going to go to a lawyer and try to sort this out because you know it's a big mess right now.
Yeah. Well, we wish you all kinds of luck, and will you keep us posted on how it's going?
Yes, of course.
And did you think about doing any of those online college courses that we were talking about too?
Yes. I'm actually probably going to do online courses at my local community college.
Wonderful.
And so I got accepted, as I said yesterday. So that's going to be, I want to get into psychology and work with people with autism. So that would be great.
Well, Cassidy, you are an inspiration to all of us, and I thank you for asking to Skype in. And please stay in contact with us. We want to know what ends up happening.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think you've got some exciting things in your future.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Cassidy. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. An amazing young woman, 19 years old, and so well-spoken, and quite a lot of drive, excitement for things to come in her future. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Dr. Adel Najdowski for Real Progress with Dr. Adel. Stick with us.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's going to play football, he's going to do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, you know, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Persicke, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy. But, we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting two battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called, and they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle. Without that, they wouldn't be able to receive the service dog, so we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta, and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear ACT Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. We underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're thrilled right now to welcome, on a different day than normal, but thank you for being willing to come in today. It's Dr. Adel Najdowski. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome,
and
as always.
We call this segment Real Progress with Dr. Adel because you help us to get to that progress, which I think is the key to everything, is finding progress. I think sometimes we want to quantify it and say, as parents we dream and go, well, I want to get here, right? But the only way you can get to wherever here is by making progress.
Exactly.
So love the opportunity to talk with you because you help us to get there. And I've shared before on the show that I got to spend almost a year every morning talking with you for an hour. And it was a life-changing year. It was it opened my eyes. And can I say this too, that we had been having ABA therapy in our home for more than 4 years at that point. And I think I was in a place where I knew that I didn't know everything, but I thought that I knew a lot.
Right.
And then spending that year with you, it was like my little pea brain was like here, and you expanded it. And now I know I'm never going to know everything.
You're so sweet.
No, it's true. It's true.
Are you
and
welling up a little bit there?
I always do. I'm very emotional here. I'm perimenopausal. I get to cry on every show. It's written into my contract.
Awesome.
Yes. But in any case, I'm never going to thank you enough for that year. And someday, when I'm old and have nothing else to do, I am going to write a book, Mornings with Dr. Adel, because it really, if I could give the gift of that to everyone, I would. And it's one of the things that I think about being here doing the show all the time is how do I share what I learned in that year with everybody at home.
If you write that book, I'll be really excited.
Will you do the foreword?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. All right. So in any case, I asked you to come in this week and talk with us about challenging behavior because this is something that we all have to deal with, even if we don't have a child on the spectrum, right?
Yes.
You're a parent of two very typical children, and you have challenging behavior from time to time in your home. Don't you? Please say yes.
Well, currently, it's like the biggest thing with my 4-year-old.
Okay. All right. Because it happens, right? It's a part of development.
Right.
And I always try to remind myself, I can't when I'm emotionally in the moment, but if we think of challenging behavior as communication, and when they're really pushing our buttons, it does mean that they're trying for something.
Yeah.
And that, on some level, is positive. Because we could take that energy and we could redirect it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, I mean, any challenging behavior that they engage in, there's something they're trying to get, and that's why they're engaging in it. So, what we do so often as parents is that we listen to what they're asking for and we give it to them. And I find myself doing that as well with my child who's 4. And now I've got this whiny kid who, when she gets told no, that she can't have something or have it her way or whatever, she immediately raises her voice and starts to throw a big stink.
Right. Well, she's a woman in training.
And then I sometimes catch her father, give it to her, and then I say, why are you giving a screaming child something right now?
Right. And you know what I love about you admitting that is because I say here on the show all the time, we all are going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? And if you accept the fact that some days you are going to be a higher parent self and some days you're going to be a lower parent self because you just, need to make it work in the moment, or sometimes you just blow it without even thinking about it because you're distracted. At least if we all admit that, we don't have to judge ourselves or judge other people, but we can get back to the business of, okay, but now what do I want to teach?
Yeah, but here's the problem is that, we can be good parents and we can follow these principles and we can implement them, 90% of the time, let's say. But if 10% of the time we're not, what do? We conclude and we say, it's not working.
There you go.
But the truth is that, and I heard this analogy from a good friend of mine who's a colleague and works here at CARD, who said to me, he was using the slot machine analogy with a parent to try to explain. And basically he was saying, like, listen, how often does the slot machine actually pay you? How often do you actually win? And the answer to that is, like, almost never. Right? But yet people sit there on slot machines all day long. Why do they sit on slot machines all day long? Because they eventually might get paid.
Right.
Because they've been paid before once or twice.
Right.
Think of that as the analogy of the child.
Yeah.
I'm going to just keep doing it because eventually maybe I'm going to get what I want.
Right. I've either had this work once before or twice before, or I've seen it work for somebody else.
Yeah. So it's not that it's not working, what you're implementing, it's that you're not being consistent.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part. And then when you're tired and emotional or stressed or whatever else you're going through, there's that saying, choose your battles.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's where you have to get on the antecedent side of things and just kind of know your child well enough to know when they're told no, or if they can't have the thing they just asked for, there's a good chance there's going to be whining and crying.
Yeah.
Am I able to deal with that right now?
Right.
And if not, maybe you just give it to them when they ask.
Before they get to the whining thing.
Yeah.
Right, that's the key to it. If you're going to be weak, and we have Evelyn Gould come on, and she talks about, is it a yes day for you or is it a no day for you? Because if you're in a day when you can't deal with it, maybe it's better to give in before the fight than have them give that challenging behavior and give in to that. Because then what we've taught is make sure you act like a buffoon, be a brat, and you'll get what you want.
Yeah, the worst is when you see the child, actually say, can I please have X or whatever, and then they're told no, and so then they throw a big fit, and then there's a big argument going back and forth, and then someone has to give in, so maybe the parent gives in and then gives the object, and I just say, like, when they asked the first time, you could have just gave it to them when they said please, you know?
Right. And we're going to talk in a minute about when our kids are non-vocal, because there's lots of different ways that our kids request stuff. And as long as they're requesting it in an appropriate manner, like biting you is not an appropriate manner. But, you know, if there is a sign for something and you know you've got other demands to put on your kid, that's not the day to say no to the cookie, even when you feel like, ugh, we've had enough cookies.
Yeah, if you can't follow through, then it's probably not worth it.
So you get there beforehand. Okay. So I also, some of the things that we hear, it's really hard for me. One of the questions we asked earlier in the week, we asked parents, what challenging behavior does your child engage in?
Okay.
And the list
is long.
Oh my goodness. And we started going through some of them. And what always happens whenever we talk about this is that I feel like we need to back up and remind everybody that all of the challenging behaviors are things that we can target and see improvement on.
Yeah.
Is there any part of what I just said that you don't think is true?
No, I agree with you.
Okay. And I feel like that is one of the biggest messages that our parents need to know, that there's nothing off limits.
Yeah, nothing.
Okay. So, but then parents get into this thing of, but clearly I don't know how to then.
Right.
And you have a tool that's pretty amazing, I have to say. And it's been very helpful to me in a lot of different ways. And it is a behavior intervention plan builder.
Correct.
Okay.
That's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. That's why I slowed down, because I want to make sure I got it right. And what exactly does this do?
Okay, so let me first explain why it's called the Behavior Intervention Plan Builder, because we're kind of using the terminology and the lingo that's used in school settings.
Okay.
So when a child's going to school and they engage in challenging behavior in the classroom, they're required to have a document in place called a Behavior Intervention Plan. Sometimes people refer to them as the BIP. I've also heard people call them the BIP.
The BIP.
And this is a plan that's in place of how everyone is going to consistently react to and what kind of antecedents they're going to set up, you know, to avoid the challenging behavior, let's say.
And I think of this as, you know, the fire drill map. That if we know that there's going to be a fire drill, we know we're going to go out this door. You get on a plane, and they say, you know, look at where the exits are. This is what we're going to do, so that it isn't a big surprise. If this thing happens, we're going to all know what to do. And the BIP is supposed to be in place so that everybody has agreed this is what happens. So we don't get a teacher pulling a child's ear or putting them in a cardboard box or sticking them in a duffel bag or any of the horrible atrocities that we've heard in the last year. The BIP is supposed to make sure that we're doing something that's effective.
Yes, and make sure everyone is doing the same thing so that it sends the correct messages to the child so that they can learn what will happen when they do these things.
Right, right. And I think part of that is that, again, that it has to be effective. So how, as a parent, do we know what's effective? This has always been my problem as a parent.
That's very difficult, and I'm going to admit that even with a PhD in the field, I could write a BIP for any child, but I'm going to spend a lot of time thinking about it. And then now what we've done is we've taken a lot of the thinking out and created this tool where basically anyone who's using the tool just needs to know the function of the behavior. So like in school settings, they'll conduct what's called a functional behavioral assessment, or an FBA, and that will indicate why the child's engaging in behavior. Once that reason is figured out, then the whole BIP is written around the reason to give the child some alternative means of communication to get whatever the need is that they're trying to get across when they engage in the challenging behavior, and gets everyone on the same page with implementing it.
And as a parent, I always think, you know, I want to do, you guys have done a great deal of research. You've worked with thousands, tens of thousands of children to see this is what works in this particular circumstances, this what isn't as effective.
Yeah.
And then there's choices within there, but I don't have access to all of that research in one place, except that I do with your with your BIP builder.
So basically what was done is that all evidence-based procedures that are known to work for a given function of a challenging behavior were put together into this program where it will ask questions about the behavior and whether or not you want to include those particular options. And so you're not presented with options unless it's already evidence-based that it will work for that particular function of a challenging behavior.
And I've said before on the show that this year for IEP there was a BIP, that a BIP suggestion that somebody put out on our IEP team, and I sat down with your behavior intervention plan builder, and I took the same function that they had and I put it in, and I started to see and put the things that they put in, and the system warned me and said, this has not been proven to these strategies would be more effective with this. And I was able to go back to the IEP meeting and say, no, where is your evidence base that this works? Because here are the things that work. And everybody went, oh.
And the other thing, too, is that sometimes people use evidence-based procedures, but they jump straight to the more intrusive ones, or the ones that maybe use more of like punishment instead of reinforcement. So this builder, when it provides options to you, it tries to lead the user to pick the least intrusive interventions first.
Right. And it makes it so it's hard, if not impossible, for you to leave something out. Because when we used to have our talks and we would talk about things, and I would go through and I would ask you questions, I would say, okay, so if a child was doing this and the function of the behavior was this, then how about doing this? And the thing that I remember over and over, you'd say, where's the replacement behavior, Shannon? Where's the replacement behavior? How are you expecting the child to just do something else when you haven't given them something else to do that fulfills the function? And it was just sort of my go-to for months that I would forget the replacement behavior, and your intervention plan builder doesn't allow you to do that.
Yeah, and it also gets you to put other things in place that will make the behavior less likely to even occur to begin with.
Right.
So we don't have to just use consequences all the time to teach children the correct thing. We get in before they engage the behavior. We teach them some sort of other way of communicating and provide tons of reinforcement for that and build that up to where maybe they don't even need to engage in the challenge behavior anymore because we've made this other alternative communication much easier than whatever their challenging behavior was.
And certainly a good example of that, when the function of the behavior is attention, a lot of times one of the more effective ways of dealing with attention is to give a child attention before they seek attention in a negative way.
So you realize, okay, this child needs attention. So how often are they hitting me right now? And you could collect data on that. They hit me about once every 5 minutes. So guess what? If I give them attention once every 4 minutes, and I plan for that. It's in my BIP. Every 4 minutes, someone will walk over and just pat the child and say, how's it going? Or smile at them. Something.
Right.
Maybe we can avoid, oh, they're getting all the attention they need. They're good.
Right. Very effective. And I think a lot of times people go, oh, every 4 minutes I'm going to have to give attention. And teachers will go, oh, how am I going to do anything? But eventually, over time, you can make that period of time longer and longer.
Yes.
It's amazing how effective that works. I've used that in the classroom, and it's very effective.
Yeah.
Amazing product.
Can we put up the BIP builder? The first slide has questions on it, so it just shows kind of like, you can see this is a large paragraph here, and it has a very jargony technical title, Antecedents for Escape, and it's written like this because this paragraph is actually explaining in layman's terms what that little jargony title means, and then it's asking the user, is this something you would like to include in your BIP? And then you as a user click yes or no. And then based on how you answer that question depends on what other questions you're going to get. So if you said yes to that, then it starts giving you options for different kinds of antecedents. And so the next one you see is demand fading. Again, jargony, but the paragraph underneath it explains what that means. Now what happens is after a while, if a user uses this, and I don't think it would take that many times, they won't even need to read those paragraphs anymore. They'll see the jargon term and they'll actually know what it is. So guess what? We're inadvertently teaching people too what everything means so they can start to throw it out in their IEPs
and can I be honest that
educated.
That really was my experience of the first time I looked at it. I was so excited to do it, and I went in and the first thing that I saw, I went, oh, am I going to be able to do this? I don't think I know enough to be able to do this. But I took a breath and I read the paragraph and I went, oh, thank goodness they explained it to me in a way that I could understand. So I will caution people that when you first look at it, the thought of it is intimidating, but it's all there for you.
But I like how the titles are staying true to the name so that they can go in and talk the lingo eventually. I think they'll be able to.
That made a huge difference when I went into the IEP meeting and said,
like, you can say, I want demand fading in my child's BIP.
Right.
And they might actually look at you cross-eyed if they don't have a BCBA on staff.
Right.
In which case now you have the upper hand and the power, right?
That's exactly the truth. And look, it's IEP season. We need every bit of power and empowerment. Really, because before, as parents, we sat there at the table and they would slide a BIP over at us and we would look at it and go, okay, I don't know if you say so. But this empowers you to know, is this something that's evidence-based? Is this something that has the potential to help my child?
And I really wish that it wasn't the case that parents had to actually know and be on their game and question what's being written. You would hope that experts are writing those. But I hate to say it, a lot of times it's not necessarily the most qualified people that are writing them. So this tool would be very helpful. Can we bring up the second slide? This slide actually shows what the VIP ends up looking like. So after you answer your yes/no questions, then it actually produces this report. And it says basically instructions as to what people are going to do. So an antecedent is just what are you going to do beforehand to try to prevent the behavior from even occurring. And then 3 options were chosen when answering questions, so you have your 3 options there of what you're going to do, and it's written in a description to tell anyone who's following the BIP what to do. And then there's little fill in the blanks, and the whole team can decide exactly what they want to put in those blanks.
Yeah, and I do love that it gives you a lot of options, but it really walks you down the path so that you're not alone.
Yeah, but in addition to all that, you have the ability to customize it, so you can add in your own text boxes if there's additional things you want to do, because not everything fits inside one box.
Yes,
we know that.
An amazing tool.
And you can rewrite it into your own words if you feel like the staff you're giving it to may not completely understand it, or you want to add something to it or whatever. So that's nice too, and then you can save it, and you can always go back and see your BIPs, and you can update them, or you can create new ones, and there's a file storage cabinet basically that they sit in.
And I have to say, one of the bits of advice that a parent gave on the show a couple of months ago is that once your IEP is done, and there's a place on the top of your IEP to check that the BIP is attached because it's been agreed to take that, print it off, put it in a sheet protector with the IEP on one side and the BIP on the other side, and give it to every single person who has interactions with your child on the team, because sometimes the school keeps it locked in a file cabinet.
And then no one's actually following it or even aware of it.
Oddly enough, sometimes that happens. But I thought, what a great thing to do at the beginning of the school year, to have it in the sheet protector and give it to the teacher. If there's an aide, give it to the aide, give it to the people on the lunch line, give it to the bus driver. And, it ensures that everybody at least is informed.
Right.
And hopefully, they're good people, and a lot of times they are good people at school, that they'll ask questions, and you can say, if you have any questions, please talk to me about this, but this is what we're following. It's a legal document. And, because once it's attached to the IEP, legal document, they have a legal responsibility to follow what's on that piece of paper. Very, very important.
Exactly.
We've got a bunch of questions that have come in, and we also had a question about the skills. But before we go away from this segment, how do people get access to the Behavior Intervention Plan Builder?
Currently, this is one tool within the skills program. So
it's just a free element of once you have skills, it comes with it.
Exactly. So
amazing tool, Skills. We haven't even talked about the other things that Skills does. And you have a 15-day free trial for Skills that people can get. So if this is something they want to check out.
Yeah, it's 14 days free.
Excuse me.
Yeah, and so all they need to do is go to www.skillsforautism.com, and they can sign up for the 14-day trial.
Cool. All right. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and answer some of the questions that you guys have written in, and we have a specific question about Skills as well. So stick with us. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, host of Autism Live. As the mom of a young man on the autism spectrum, I frequently look to the world and hope for compassion. Well, recently I told my son that he should treat others the way he wants them to treat him. That's when I realized that it's high time that I start walking my talk. This April, for Autism Awareness Month, Autism Live is asking everyone to perform an act of compassion. Do something nice for someone else. That's why I've decided to shave my head to show support for a young dad who's fighting brain cancer. How will you show your compassion? Compassion is a tool of change, but only when we take action. How we treat others teaches them how to treat us in return. This April, the autism community has the ability to lead by example by putting compassion in action. This can be a small act or a large one. It can be close to home or towards someone on the other side of the planet. If we all perform an act of compassion, who knows? We might just change the world. Get involved and show us your compassion in action on Facebook.com/AutismLive. And tune in on April 8th to watch me shave my head live on the air. We are not powerless. We can create change. Compassion in action. Welcome back to Autism Live. Our very special guest in the studio right now is the fabulous Dr. Adel Najdowski, who has a great deal of experience working with children on the autism spectrum. We're so lucky to have her here, and you guys have been writing in questions. The first one, hi, Shannon and Dr. Adel. My question today is, how does ABA work if I only want my 11-year-old mainstream son to benefit from learning social skills over the summer? I can send him to any summer camp with typical peers. However, I don't know how that is really helping him over the summer. I can, wait, I gotta scroll down here, sorry. With his delay in age-appropriate language skills and being socially age-appropriate. Just looking at camps now and how a therapist would participate over the summer. Interesting question.
Right. Well, first of all, if a camp is definitely the route you want to go, a lot of camps will allow you to send in some sort of specialist or aide or therapist or whatever, somebody trained in behavior analysis. And, you know, sometimes when you do that, if they look like they're attached to your son, then it kind of ruins the whole chance of him using his social skills because all the other kids think he's kind of weird or different. So one method has been for this person to basically kind of act like another camp counselor. And sometimes the camps are okay with that because if you think about it, it's like additional help for their camp, which means more bodies, which means they can help with the other kids too. And they just kind of would be facilitating everybody getting along, and it doesn't look as though that person is only there for your son. So that would be one option. However, with that, your son's basically going to be learning social skills like as the need occurs in the context of a camp, which I think is really good because that's like training in the natural environment. But you might also want to look at social skills groups where they can do a little bit more focused intervention with him, where they can figure out exactly what social skills he's missing, and they can do role plays with him, and they can walk him through what he would do. And then what happens is then when he goes to camp, he actually gets to practice the skills that he's learned.
Yeah, because it is that kind of thing about, you know, let's say that the child was doing gymnastics and they were going to do a gymnastics meet. We would never want to just show up at the meet and assume that it's all going to go well. You would want to practice things outside the meet and then bring them into the meet. And our kids need that too. So a place to practice the social skills and then have a place, the meet, where they get to go and put them into place, and plenty of opportunities. We know that
and it doesn't have to be groups. I mentioned social skills groups. It could even be one-on-one social skills training. So maybe the same aide that's going to the camp can take good notes as to what social issues show up at the camp, and then they can go and rehearse them at home and then prepare the child for the next thing. Or they can even come up with social goals like, okay, I noticed at camp you're always playing off to the side by yourself and you're not engaging with anyone. So here's going to be your goal. Tomorrow you're going to go and do this with 3 friends. And they give them scripts almost of things they can like say to begin to initiate interactions and stuff like that, and then they kind of coach them through it. So I think the combination of the two would be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I see in this question is that there's a bunch of different things that you're looking at because you want to improve the social skills, but you want to catch up with age-appropriate language skills as well, and to make sure that you've got somebody working with you so that it doesn't get muddied. I think as parents we go, oh, there's just so much to work on, and we try to work on it all at the same time, whereas if you take 10 minutes to work on a social skill and 10 minutes to work on a language skill and then putting those things together, I think that, you know, that's what therapists remind me on a regular basis. Okay, great. We've got another question here. By the way, somebody wrote in about our Roku channel, because we're on Roku now as well, and you want to know what our Roku channel code is. You'll have to search on Roku for autism. There are only 2 programs on Roku for autism, and you'll find us easily. I don't know what the code is. Another person who wrote in here and said, my child who is mainstream with an aide mumbles, TV talk, and gets asked by his aide, do you need a break as a result of that behavior? If he then gets to leave the room, isn't that a reward? Didn't he just learn how to get out of doing what he's not interested in doing? I just don't know how his aide and teachers choose when it is not a reward to leave the room. Any advice? Our jargon today was stereotypy. So we were talking about this very sort of thing. So what do you think? It's a fine line, right?
Well, I can't actually even say whether or not leaving the room is a reward for your son because we don't know why he's mumbling. A lot of times that behavior is not to escape a situation or to get out of something. It's just something that they do because it in and of itself is like intrinsically reinforcing. Like, you know, what we all do. Tap our fingers, move our foot, whatever. We all do these different things, these stereotypies. So who knows if he's doing it to escape? He could be, but he also might not be. So whether or not that's a reward kind of depends on the purpose of why he's doing it. Now, normally, if we're going to put escape in there or some sort of break, we do it because we know the child is engaging in the behavior to get out of doing the work, but we don't give the break contingent on engaging in the challenging behavior. So if the challenging behavior is movie talk and mumbling, we don't give a break once he mumbles, right? Because what are we doing? We're rewarding it, like you said. So instead what we do is we figure out like how often is he mumbling or whatever, or we just insert frequent breaks throughout, or we do it's funny that demand fading came up earlier when I was showing the BIP builder. We do something like decrease the amount of tasks we're giving him to almost nothing initially, which I know kind of freaks parents out, but and then slowly introduce more and more tasks over time and build it up. Or we enrich the environment so that it's really like fun to do the work. Maybe, you know, it's something very simple, like they are allowed to hold a stress ball or do something like that while they're doing the work. And when that happens, then we notice, okay, it makes them less likely that they even want to escape or whatever. So I guess what I'm saying is it's only rewarding the behavior if he is mumbling to escape. And in addition to that, I wouldn't provide the escape right after the mumbling. I would come up with some other plan or schedule for the escape, and the escape would be based off of maybe an alternative communicative response, like he can ask for a break or something. I realize he's going to ask for a break a lot, maybe in the beginning, but everything starts with just teaching him the new communicative response and letting him do it almost as much as he wants, and then eventually you begin to fade that out.
Okay.
And it works. Surprisingly.
Absolutely.
Because you have lots of other little reinforcers in there too. So.
Okay, great. And then we had one more question. I'm so afraid that the more I ask of my son's teachers, the more they're going to say, we can't accommodate all of your requests. You need to go to another specialized school. And one of the, this is a parent fear that we all feel that. If I'm the squeaky wheel and I ask for this, then they're going to treat my child in a way that's negative, or they're going to say that he or she can't go to school here, and they're going to want a more restricted environment. Here's what I want to remind everybody is that the law provides that all of our schools in the United States have a legal obligation to provide FAPE, free, appropriate public education. When a school is threatening you, or you're afraid that they're threatening you with a more restrictive environment, and that's how we refer to if your child, if they're in a mainstream situation and they want to move them to the resource room or a special day class, or they want to move them to a special day school, they have to mount an argument to say why your child cannot be in that least restrictive environment. They will put pressure on parents sometimes in a way that is really not appropriate, and you need to remind yourself that they really don't have legal standing to do that unless your child is not being safe within the classroom and not demonstrating that they can meet goals. Now, I know we've had parents in the past who've written in and said, but they're not changing the goals. And if they have not been adept at saying, we didn't meet this goal and here's why and here's what we're going to do to change it, they don't have legal standing. And it will turn into, you may need a lawyer, you may need an advocate, but the one thing that I would say to parents always is don't allow yourself to be bullied by suggestions that they're going to move your child. They have to be able to prove that your child needs a more restrictive environment, and that's a lot for them to prove. Do you, anything you want to add to that, Dr. Najdowski?
No, there's nothing I want to add. I loved your response. I just am like feeling for the parents right now because I feel like it takes someone who's more like a pit bull, and a lot of parents don't want to deal with that necessarily.
Yeah.
And they have to put themselves out there to do things that are very challenging.
It is.
I know it's hard.
And it's exhausting. I said last Friday, you got to put your Norma Ray on. You got like a costume, you put it on, and even when you're not feeling it, you pretend you're feeling it. I always dress very specifically to go to IEP meetings so that I look a little on the intimidating side.
Do you stick your hair straight up? Because I know some animals, when they want to intimidate, they...
No, I don't
get poofier.
I don't do that, but I make sure my makeup is on a certain way, and then I'm power dressed, and then I bring lots of documents that have lawyers' names on them.
Do you bring lots of goodies too, like cookies and donuts? Try to basically bribe them. Set up an antecedent to where they'll be less likely.
I do. I bring lemonade and I bring brownies to the IEP meetings. They know that I do this. And it used to be in the beginning, I brought a picture of my child in a frame, and I was like, let's remember this is who we're talking about here. Yes. And I would bring sort of like Brie Vandekamp on Desperate Housewives. I used to bring it in a basket all covered with napkins, and I would come in like Little Red Riding Hood and be like, I'm going to be so nice, but power dressed like don't mess with me. It is a bizarre sort of thing, where you're playing chicken sometimes, and you feel resentful that, this is my child's education. I shouldn't be playing chicken with a group of professionals, but you do what you have to do to make it work, right?
Yeah.
But don't let them intimidate you. If they start talking about a special school, then you start talking about why are you not in compliance? And smile while you're saying it, right? With your very intimidating lipstick on, but you don't have to be bullied. And we can talk more about that, but I know we have to let you go. We have one more question, though, that came in about skills, about can you use skills with a nonverbal child?
Oh, right. The question was whether or not you could do it with a non-vocal child. That's a whole nother thing to discuss the difference between verbal and vocal. But basically, let's just say a non-vocal child. That doesn't mean they can't necessarily communicate, but they're just not doing it through speech, let's say, right?
Yes.
So yes, skills can be used with those type of children. Skills is basically based off of child development, going from infancy skills and moving upward toward adolescent skills. And so there's many, many skills in there that are going to be relevant for very young children who aren't even vocal yet anyways.
Yeah.
So they may need some of those things like motor skills and adaptive skills and so on. But when it comes to other areas like language, where the most typical response would be to use vocal speech, that doesn't mean you can't use skills with them. It just means that you have to modify the lesson a little. So all the lessons are customizable. Mm-hmm. So when you look at a lesson, if you see a response that has a vocal response and you know your child can learn that concept, but they're just not going to say it, then you just plan on using that lesson anyways and just modify it in terms of what the response requirement is of the child to maybe use some sort of device or something like that to
It could be signing, it could be iconic communication, you could be using an iPad. They adapt really well, the lessons.
But I've had some people actually ask me, is skills just for Asperger's children or for high-functioning autism? Because I don't see lessons in here that look like they're built for children that are non-vocal, and we say, no, it's not like that at all. It's just that we can't create a curriculum that would be able to have every single response option like that available because we already have 4,000 things in there.
Right.
So people just have to realize that the child can still engage in that same behavior but just use a different form of communication than speech.
Absolutely, and that's going to be different for every child because they require different things. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming in, and we'll have you back with us not next week but the week after.
Okay, sounds good.
So thank you so much. We're going to go now. We're really late, but we're going to go to the A word. I want to remind everybody this is a documentary, an ongoing documentary being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. They're following a little boy, Jack Riley, as he begins his early intensive behavioral intervention. And also want to remind you that the parents from the A word, Mike and Cheryl, will be with us on the show tomorrow at 10:30. Very exciting. We haven't had them on the show before. So take a look. This is the A word. And when we come back, we'll be joined by Angela Persicke, another BCBA. It's just a revolving door of BCBAs this morning. So if you've got more questions, keep them coming in. Stick with us.
Have fun.
Okay, bye.
I take. Oh.
He's starting to sit a little bit longer, and he gets the idea, okay, if I sit, get my stickers, then I can go. This is actually a 10 token board, but right now he's only on 5 right now, but eventually we'll move him up to 10. It's a good way for him to visually see, you know, that there is an end. Like, once I get all the board filled up with stickers, then I can leave.
Jessica does a preference assessment to see what Jack Riley wants to work for before she begins her first trial.
Okay, what do you want, pancakes or do you want bubbles?
Bubbles.
See, I
want pancakes.
Okay. Do you want pancakes or bubbles?
Pancakes.
Pancakes? Say, I want pancakes.
Want pancakes.
Okay, sounds good. What's your dad's name?
Mike.
Mike, good job. Here you go. Now put the J on.
Push the J on.
Put the J. J. Good job. Nice job. When's your birthday?
December 15th.
December 15th. Good job. How old are you?
2.
Nice. Can you show me the fingers?
2.
2. Good job. Here you go. What's your mom's name?
Cheryl.
Cheryl. Very good. Whoops. Whoops. Here you go. Put another one on there. Where does the K go? Good job. What does it say? Jack. Say Riley. There you go. All done. Here you go. It's good. Okay, go play. See you later.
What?
Here, you gonna bring the tractor?
Elbows.
The pig, yeah, it is a pig.
Wait.
Lining up objects is associated with autism because it shows that the child doesn't know how to appropriately play with toys. This is why Jack Riley's therapists teach play skills, so you can learn how to learn. Playing is learning through imitation, and it also helps develop communication skills. This is why the behavior is redirected.
Let's make a bridge for the dinosaurs. Are they friends? Should we walk? Let's walk. Let's walk. Yay! Let's go play. What else can we do? Jack, what is this? It's
Is it this way? Is it this way?
It's a this way?
Is it this way?
Is it a bridge? Did you make a bridge? It's a bridge. Can the dinosaur walk on the bridge? Walk on the bridge?
Walk.
Can you make the dinosaur walk? You do it.
Dinosaur walk.
Jack Riley, do it. Make him walk. Walk. Here, slide down. Slide. Whee! Ready? I want to do it. Ready? Whee!
Sometimes lining up toys can be appropriate play. Jack Riley lines up his blocks to build a bridge. What makes lining up toys an indicator for autism is when the behavior is limited and is the only way the child interacts with the objects.
That's more creative, Jack. At clinic, Sabrina suggested to make a visual schedule because he's been having a hard time walking outside. So look, what's this first? There's Dad, there's you, there's Miss Shireen. You're holding hands. Like you're walking on the sidewalk, holding hands. And then when you get to the grass, you stop. You stop.
You stop.
Yep. You stop. And then what do you get to do? You get to run on the
grass.
Say run on the grass. Good job. The end. But yeah, so we were gonna show him like along the way as every step, like you walk out, you hold hand, and emphasize holding hands.
Okay.
You guys walking the sidewalk holding hands, and then the next picture is you guys stopping in front of the grass.
Okay.
Still holding hands.
Okay.
And then his reward is
You get to play.
He gets to play on the grass. And he got the concept, early idea. Anyway, we'll see if put into play, will he get it? But I'm sure he'll get it.
He'll get it.
Yeah.
Having a destination was the biggest thing for him. Like knowing what the goal was.
I think before you say come here, and he thinks it's over. And yesterday he'd be playing, and Cheryl would say come here, and he would run down, and then she'd whisper, "You want to go to the grass?" And so he just was.
Good.
I think it's all been about, now we have to go in every time we call him.
Every tantrum he has are really a lot of his bad behaviors because he doesn't know.
What do you have to do first?
Remember, what are you gonna do first?
Hold what?
You want to do it, or you want me to do it?
Hold what?
Since he sees your picture.
Hold hands. Go hold hands with Dad, like the picture.
Good.
All right.
Remember like yesterday.
15, 16, 17, 18, 19.
We still hold hands.
We still hold hands.
Stop.
Right?
We still hold hands.
Where do you guys know that?
Right here, and then we made a mask.
Yeah, then we stop and make him ask.
Can you say, I want to play on the grass? Okay, go.
Yay! Go!
Have you hugged your tree today? You gonna kiss it too? Tree hugger and a tree. Come here.
Goes.
Yay! Uh-oh, wet butt. Wet butt. Hey, do you want stairs or grass?
Grass.
Okay, stay with Mom. 10 steps. 10 steps. Ready? 1, 2. All right, stay with me.
10 steps.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You want grass? Okay, good.
Using a visual schedule has helped Jack Riley a lot on outings because he can anticipate what will happen next. And unlike last week, there has been no aggression or biting. Whether it's a token board or a visual schedule, having items JR can see helps him a lot to know what's happening next and therefore be a lot less anxious.
What do you want? You want grass or do you want... Okay, go play.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're so lucky to have with us here in the studio Angela Persicke, and she is a BCBA. I said it's like revolving door BCBAs today, which is great, best of all possible worlds. And thank you so much for being here with us. You work in the... now my brain totally went on freeze, but you work in the research and development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, but you also have a title with the Autism Research Group, which is...
I am the Assistant Director of Autism Research Group.
Okay, great. And I'll borrow a brain from someone else later on.
No problem.
In any case, we've been talking about challenging behavior all week long, and so thrilled to have your take on some of these different things. We were just talking with Dr. Adel Najdowski about the Behavior Intervention Plan Builder, and she mentioned the function of a behavior. Yes. So can we talk with you a little bit about that? How do we know first of all, what is the function of a behavior?
The function of the behavior is what variables in the environment that occur after the behavior are maintaining it. So what is the child getting out of it? Why is the child actually engaging in this behavior and continues to engage in this behavior over time? Yeah. So we call that the function. This behavior functions to get this.
Right. I always refer to it, I use the Dr. Phil terminology, what's the paycheck? There's a paycheck for this behavior, and it was very eye-opening for me to realize, because I never really thought about it this way, but we all do things because we get something back from it. There is some sort of a paycheck. Sometimes it's a little confusing what the paycheck is because it isn't necessarily always a great thing, and yet we still do it. People always say, well, I don't believe that the child's engaging in the challenging behavior when they hear it's for attention, because they say, because all I'm doing is yelling at them. Why, who wants to be yelled at? And yet people who desperately need attention will take any attention they can get. Yep. All you have to do is pick up a tabloid and see evidence of that.
Exactly.
and those are people who are completely, supposedly neurotypical. So, and we've all done that before.
Yes, exactly. This talking about the function of a behavior is not specific to this field of autism. It's everything we do has a function. We do everything for some reason.
Yes.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it.
Right. And you know, I think, you know, especially when I had a child on the autism spectrum, for a while, my house felt like chaos, chaos in motion. And it seemed like things that were happening that were chaos. And somebody would say, you know, why is he doing that? And to me, it's, you know, there's no reason. It's just, and I had heard, oh, well, that's the autism. And so the first time somebody said, oh, that's not the truth at all. Everything that your child is doing happens for a reason, and we just need to figure out what the reason is and give him different tools. It was so eye-opening to me and so hopeful to me. Oh, you mean if we just learn and we change these variables, we change how my child learns and how he behaves, and it's all possible? Yippee.
And that's the key feature of behavior analysis. That's what we do. We take what could be causing the behavior outside of the person, outside of the label that the child is given or the person is given, and we place it in the environment. What is going on in the environment? And that's what we modify. That's what we do. We modify these contingencies.
Yeah.
What's going on before the behavior occurs? What's going on after?
Yeah.
And to create a better learning environment, to make it so your child is actually learning from the environment as well.
Wonderful. But so we've been talking about interventions for challenging behavior and how you actually get down to the brass tacks of changing behavior. And one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about is what are some of the things that we do based on what the function of the behavior is? Because here's the other part of it that's just shocking to me is that you might think to yourself, okay, well, here's an intervention. You know, one intervention that we can do for children who are misbehaving is we can ignore the behavior. But depending on what the function of the behavior is, that might be the exact wrong thing to do.
Exactly. So if we're, we have four main functions that we talk about. There's escape, maintain. So the child is doing something to get out of a demand.
Yes.
So, you know, if your child is in a school setting and yells a lot and gets kicked out of class every single time, and this happens every single day, the child might actually be getting what he wants by getting kicked out of class and not having to do math anymore. So that's what we talk about, escape, maintain.
And we all do this.
Yes.
We all do things like that. If I don't want to deal with something, I find myself at the refrigerator. I'm going to eat something instead of having to do with the thing. I want to escape what that feels like, even if it's just for a few minutes.
We even do this with our own thoughts, too.
Yes.
We try to escape from our own thoughts or avoid our own thoughts. And it's the same thing. It's functioning. It's an escape, maintain behavior.
Okay.
And then there is attention maintained. And like you mentioned, it's not always good attention. Like, oh, you're so great, you're wonderful, good attention, pat you on the back. It could be yelling, negative attention. So like, why are you doing that? Stop it right now. Or, you know, anytime the child does a certain behavior, the parent actually walks into the room. That's attention. Even as small as making eye contact could be attention.
And this is a big one. And I used to say as a teacher, I would always envision kids as empty buckets. And different amounts have to be put in them to get them to be full and to stay full. All kids have a different level of attention that they need. And some kids, boy, it feels like, woo, really? Seriously? It takes that much attention to keep you full? But if it does, your life is much better if you keep that bucket full.
Yes.
Okay, so attention, we have escape, we have attention.
Then we have automatic. So automatic, something that's automatically reinforcing is that the behavior in and of itself is reinforcing. So maybe tapping my hand on the table, it makes a sound. That's automatically reinforcing. There's not necessarily something else going on that's applied to that makes it reinforcing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And again, we all engage in these kinds of things. We do things that, you know, I mentioned earlier, because our jargon of the day today was stereotypy. And sometimes, you know, that's what's going on there. My son likes to make little high-pitched noises. It feels good to him. You know, it just is something that in and of itself, he doesn't get attention for it. He doesn't get to escape something else, but it feels good for him. You know, some people click a pen. while they're thinking. You know, it's just keeping you occupied. Some people twitch, whatever.
Exactly.
We all
Twirl
have
your
things.
hair. There's always something.
Yeah. You know, bop your knee up and down. We all have things that we do because for whatever reason it just feels good.
Exactly. And then finally, for access to a tangible or activity, so access to a preferred item or toy or a preferred activity. So getting to play with, you know, even with a peer or something like that. It could be a preferred activity.
Right. The kids who are throwing the tantrum in the grocery store because they're in that aisle where the lollipop is, and if they start to freak out in the public place and grandma gives them the lollipop, you know, well, then it worked. You whine, you get the lollipop, woohoo.
Exactly.
And, you know, or whine, you know, they're playing with dad and they're whining, and then dad goes, here, I'm going to give you to mom because I don't know what to do for you, and now I got access to mom. Woohoo.
Yep.
I got my paycheck.
Exactly.
Great.
Exactly. So these are the four main functions that we usually talk about, and for the most part, these four functions maintain a lot of behaviors in the environment. So, and this is across everybody. Like we said, like I want to emphasize that it's not just children on the autism spectrum. It's all children. I mean, if you go into a grocery store, you'll see this happen with every single child at one point or another.
Right. Go to a birthday party. It's like a sea of functioning behavior. And I call these four things the usual suspects.
Yep, exactly, exactly.
Because it's usually one of them, and sometimes it can be a mixture of two.
Yes.
And then you really are hitting the hit parade, right? Okay, so then once and of course we should talk about briefly how you figure out which one of the functions it is.
Exactly. So there's a pretty good method that we use to do this, and we call it a functional behavior assessment.
Right. And it's standardized. It's not like something that everybody's doing. No. Well, the way I do my FBA is I do this standardized thing that they do.
And if you have an IEP for your child, you're entitled to a functional behavior assessment. It's part of the IEP for your child that a professional should be conducting a functional behavior assessment, FBA.
Right.
And that would go into writing the BIP, as Adele probably talked about earlier.
Yes, absolutely. And you have the right to ask. You want to ask in writing of your school if there's a behavior that's going on. If your child is engaging in something and they're being sent home for the behavior, or they're being threatened to go to another school, first thing you want to do is ask in writing and say, can we get an FBA done on this behavior? And they need to, and you need to ask who is the person that's doing it. Are they someone who's qualified to do an FBA? And they will come back with a function. They'll say, this is what the behavior is, here's what the function is. And together, you're supposed to sit down and put the BIP together.
Exactly. So it requires a few steps. So first, you may want to do some indirect assessments, and these are fairly standardized as well. And so they could be questionnaires or interviews. Ask the teacher, the parent, anybody who's involved with the child, what is going on?
Right.
Like, what exactly do you see when this behavior occurs? What do you do when this behavior occurs?
Right. It's like they become Sherlock Holmes, and they're going to take all the investigative information
Exactly.
first. Okay.
Exactly. And then, of course, we always want to do a descriptive analysis, and so that is a fancy word for just observing the child in the natural environment when the behavior would occur normally. So if the behavior is occurring only after school hours at home, of course you don't want to go to the school and observe because it's not happening there. You want to observe the behavior when and where it is occurring.
Right. So if you get somebody who's doing the FBA, and they interview mom, and they interview the teacher, and they interview, whatever, but they never actually go and observe the child in the environment, they're not doing it right.
Yes.
Okay. Just to be clear, because there are people who will try to streamline and cut some corners. So it is essential that that person, and you can ask, how many hours did they observe the child to take this FBA? Good question to ask while the tape recorder's whirring. Anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. And the reason that we look a little more highly on these descriptive analyses is because the other reports are all self-reports.
Right.
So, mom might think like, oh yeah, like he's just getting a lot of attention out of this, and that's all it is. Or, like you said earlier, a mom will say like, oh, I just yell at him. It's not attention.
Right.
You know, that's not what he's getting out of it. He definitely just wants this.
Right.
And a lot of people have their ideas of what's going on. The teacher will have a very different idea of what's going on. The parent will have a different idea. Even both parents, the mom and dad, might have a different idea.
I always think about when something's not working on your car, or you got a funny noise happening in your car, and you call up the mechanic and they say, what's happening? And you tell them and they say, I'm going to need to look at it.
Exactly.
That's what they say every single time. And you know what? If they didn't, if they just said, oh, it's this, what would you think? Wouldn't you go like, how do you know? You haven't even looked at it. Right?
Exactly.
Or if you take your child into the pediatrician and they talk to you for a second and they never touch your child, never look at their throat, never look in their ears, don't you feel like, hello, you know, you need to look at my child,
Exactly.
right? Same thing.
Exactly. Same thing. The professional needs to go in and observe the child in the environment where the behavior is occurring. And not just once, multiple times.
Yes.
Across settings, across days. Settings if the behavior is occurring in different settings.
Right.
And across days. And for a good amount of time, too. We want a good description of what is actually going on. So if the professional is only going in and observing for 10 minutes and then leaving and saying this is fine, you might want to question that as well.
Right, right. So do feel free to ask, you know, when was the child observed, for how long to arrive at this function? Because you don't want to waste time, and you want to make sure you're working with somebody who's on the up and up. Okay.
Exactly. So at this point, you might be getting a good idea. So I observed the child. I looked at what is happening before the behavior occurs, the antecedent variables. I looked at what was happening after, the consequence variables, and I have some reports from parents as well. I put all this together and I come up with some hypotheses.
Right.
This is potentially what is maintaining the behavior.
Right.
But still, this does not infer a direct cause.
Right.
Until we do an experimental functional analysis and actually manipulate these variables.
Okay.
And
now we get into territory where it really needs to be a professional who is doing this.
Who has been trained
We, as parents, never want to be attempting to do this. I always hesitate before even talking about it because I think, you know, we go, oh, I could do that. This is the equivalent of taking the engine and the brakes out of your car and saying, and I'm going to put them back in, and I'm sure I can do it and the car will be safe afterwards. We wouldn't do it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. You need in almost every case a BCBA to be doing
Board certified behavior analyst who has experience working with children on the spectrum. Okay, and so what is it then that this is? Yes.
So what the professional will do in this situation will do small segments, like 10-minute sessions, where if the behavior occurs, they will provide attention for it, provide a tangible for it, or provide escape from a demand when it occurs.
Correct me if I'm wrong, they're going to do the thing that we really don't want to do any other time. The exact opposite of what we're going to do to intervene, to see if, in fact, this is what is making it happen.
Exactly. To show that when we actually change these contingencies, what happens to the behavior? So say we provide attention for it, behavior skyrockets across a couple different sessions. But escape and just having the child be alone, and playing with toys, that doesn't do anything. Or giving tangibles, behavior is just at a pretty low level. But in the attention condition, we see it skyrocket. Then we can say that is the function. That is the cause of the behavior.
So you've tested it, you've done all the interviews, you observed the child, and now you test it to see if the hypothesis is correct.
Exactly.
Great. And so and then they come back and say, this is the function of the behavior, and everybody does the intervention. So I want to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to ask Angela to go through some of the different functions, if we have time, and say, here are some of the things that we do for this particular function that we find to be effective scientifically. We see that this, and it won't match all circumstances. So we're going to talk in very broad terms, but I think it'll be really helpful to you guys. So stick with us. Back with more after these messages. Have you ever noticed that when you do something nice for someone else, you feel great afterwards? It's because in that moment, you've shown kindness and compassion in a world that sometimes can seem chaotic and isolating. Well, this April, for Autism Awareness Month, Autism Live is asking everyone to put compassion in action. We all expect others to show compassion to our kids, to us, and to our families. What better way than to show compassion ourselves? That's why I'm asking everyone to do something nice for someone else. If we all take just one act of compassion, who knows? Maybe we can change the world. So watch Autism Live to find out how you can participate in our Compassion in Action campaign. And then make sure you tune in on April 8th when I will shave my head live for a young dad with cancer. That's my way of taking action and compassion. We are not powerless. We can create change. Compassion in action. Feel the love and the breeze. Welcome back. Our very special guest in the studio right now is the fabulous Angela Persicke. She is a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst with a great deal of experience working with children on the autism spectrum. We're talking about challenging behavior and about after you found the function of a behavior, what kinds of intervention are effective with different kinds of functions. So where do you want to start?
Let's start with attention.
Okay.
And for a lot of instances of attention, you'll find that the BCBA or the professionals say just ignore it.
Yeah.
And this is really difficult. This is really difficult. So if the child is screaming and crying, of course you don't want to provide attention in that sense. So if it's telling your child to stop yelling or stop screaming or just coming into the room, making eye contact, even, picking up your child, and hugging them when they're screaming and crying, which, can be seen as soothing. But if the behavior is maintained by attention, we want to break that contingency, and so that the child does not receive that attention from engaging in that behavior.
Right.
It's really important in these situations to also differentially reinforce an alternative behavior that's more appropriate. So we talk about teaching, using functional communication training, or teaching the child to say something instead of screaming for attention. So if the child's crying and the mom always comes, instead the child can say, "Mommy, please come here," and that could be the alternative response. And we talk about differentially reinforcing that, in that you will only reinforce the appropriate response and not the challenging behavior.
Yeah. I think there's two big issues, one of which you touched on with attention, that it's really hard in the moment with all the things going on in your life sometimes to go through and process and go, I need to not, and by the time you've thought it all through, sometimes you've already paid some attention to something. And it can be as ridiculous as not laughing when your child does something that's really inappropriate but happens to be hilariously funny.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't tell you the number of times that we were at a therapy session and my child would do or say something and clipboards would come up and you would see shoulders going because people didn't want, it's hard sometimes.
It's very
you want to laugh. Or other times when you can't, I always say that, I just want to, why did you do that? Why, haven't we talked about this before? Right? Because it's hard in the moment to not go off about things, even if it's not yelling, it's just talking to them about it. But the other hard thing is the distinction, and this is still something that my husband and I talk about. What is the difference between ignoring the behavior and ignoring the child?
Yes.
Right? And at what moment do you switch the attention back on? It's, it really is about timing and using all of our higher functioning skills. And a lot of times it's in a moment when we have 18 things going on. This is a tough one.
It's a very tough one. And a lot of times what we'll do, especially for children just starting out in an ABA program where all these things are going on, and if the child is crying and crying, we'll just wait until that breath. That 1 second where the child takes a breath and just make eye contact even.
Right.
And that's like a start. We'll start with that. And so it's not, we're just waiting for the behavior to go away. We're just, as soon as the behavior goes away, you can actually reinforce that.
Yeah.
And then, we build into that, maybe we need 3 seconds of not crying or not screaming in order to reinforce this. And it's difficult to determine that at first, and that's why it's so helpful to have a behavior analyst there with you and instructing you on how to do this at first. It's not natural.
Yeah.
You know, naturally we want to just like you said, talk to the child. Why are you doing this? Why do you keep screaming?
You need to calm down.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk to you until you calm down, right? It's just that the words want to come up. We see this all the time on the A word. I love the mom and the dad are going to be on the show tomorrow, and the dad is the king of this, and I'm like, oh, I'm on your team because I'm the queen of this, saying you need to calm down, right? Yeah. And now we've given attention. The thing, but it's hard. It's really, really hard.
Very hard.
I can think of Jem on one particular occasion when he was engaging in behavior where I had been told, don't give the behavior attention, and he was pulling on my pants and screaming, Mom, Mom, Mom. And I was like, where's this going to end? And Ryan Bergstrom was there and talking in my ear the whole time. And I said nothing, right? And I kept thinking, he's 3. Is he really going to get this? And then there was a break. He took a breath, and Ryan said, look at him. And I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise, but I looked at him. And then the screaming started again. He said, back to what you were doing, right? So Ryan was talking me through the whole thing. And it took, like 8 minutes. And my 3-year-old with autism who had almost no receptive language got it.
Yeah.
You are not going to give me the thing that I want, the attention that I want, unless I have it together.
Exactly.
And that was so eye-opening to me. But I don't know that I could have done it without Ryan there talking to me.
It's very difficult, especially if you're out in public and you just want to get out of that situation. And this is where, what you do too is maintained by these contingencies. Like, you're trying to escape from that. You want to get out of that. You don't want people to be looking at you. You don't want your child to be screaming or in pain or whatever is going on. You know your child's hurting and wants something, and you're not meeting those needs or whatever it is. Like, these are all these thoughts that are going through your head.
Yes.
And you want to get out of that. You want to escape from that. But it's all about doing what is most important for your child in the moment that will affect the behavior in the future.
Yeah.
And like you said, it took 8 minutes, and that 8 minutes probably felt like hours.
It was my whole life in that 8 minutes. But it really taught me so very much. And have I gotten it right? We talk with our kids, can they get it right 3 out of 4 trials? I don't know that I'm still there yet. But I'm a work in progress too. And when I do get it right, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference.
And that's when we talk about consistency as well. Because if you did look at him and then he started crying again and then you reinforced it after that, so you were already ignoring it and then you reinforced it and then you go back to ignoring it, you can see how the child may get confused, like, okay, then maybe I just have to keep going. I have to just keep pushing. So this is where we say consistency is so important, because if you're not consistent, you're shaping up these behaviors that are maintained by variable reinforcers.
Yes. So very important. And then also, and this was something we touched on briefly with Dr. Najdowski, that with attention, and we were talking earlier about the buckets, about giving them the attention beforehand. So important that we give them the attention before they're engaging in the behavior. So what about some of the other functions?
So tangible goes right along with that. Extinction is great for a function of a tangible or activity. And so for that, same thing, like you're giving attention when there's appropriate behavior, you're not giving the tangible or access to the activity until you see appropriate behavior either. So if the child is screaming, crying, wants the phone, the phone to play a game, you withhold it. You don't give it to the child until you see that second or two at first, of calm. And then, of course, as soon as the behavior starting in, you remove the item, remove the child from the activity, and wait it out.
Right. And I think this is another one. I've never seen the movie The Matrix. I need to watch it because people have compared it to this kind of thinking to The Matrix, that once you see this thing this way, you'll never look at it in another way. But realizing with extinction that, if they've done the behavior and gotten the paycheck on a regular basis, and what you're going to do is stop giving the paycheck for the behavior, so if I scream and you give me a lollipop, this is working for me. And now every time I scream, you absolutely absolutely are not going to give me a lollipop no matter how loud I scream, no matter how long I scream. But if there's an opportunity when I'm not screaming and I appropriately ask for the lollipop, I'm going to get it. It's going to be dicey for a while.
Yes.
Because I'm going to scream twice as loud because it worked. There was a period of time when it worked. And I'm convinced that if I scream louder, you're going to give me that lollipop. But eventually I will realize, okay, wait a second. This isn't working and this other thing is working.
It's what we see with across all people, all animals, is that when you break those contingencies and you don't provide the reward or the paycheck anymore, the individual start varying their behaviors. Like, okay, I'm going to try to do this, scream louder, scream harder, scream longer, or I'm going to try to do these different behaviors. Like, you might even see some aggressive behaviors start coming, like hitting, and it's important, like, to hold your ground and continue to maintain that extinction procedure. And this happens in all cases. I mean, even if you're trying to walk through a door and the door's locked. So what do you start to do? You start to wiggle the handle, pound on it, like throw your body against it. And those are the
we don't automatically give up, and that's a good thing in our children, that they're persistent. But in the moment, and you guys call that an extinction burst, that it gets worse before it gets better. And in the moment of an extinction burst, boy, it feels like not a small death, a major death where you're just like, oh, I'm not going to make it. Again, a great time to have reinforcements. To have other people, whether they're BCBAs or their family members, to be there and help you talk through it. As long as it's not somebody who is one of those people, the person in your family that goes, oh, just give it to him. I know. Oh, just give it to him. Clearly he's upset. We can't ever have anybody be upset. It's terrible to be upset. Give it to him, right? Those people, you want to make sure they're not in your house.
And I think you touched on a really good point, is that the behavior analyst or another person is there to reinforce what you're doing. So to tell you, give you the reward, give you the paycheck for doing the right thing in that situation. And that's, it is very hard. And a lot of times people are like, oh, behavior analysts, they just go in there and it's not even affecting them that the child is screaming at this loud level. And it's because we've practiced this many, many times. And the first time for me, it was very difficult. It's very difficult. And it's still, there are many, many times where, a child's crying, screaming, and throwing him or herself on the floor. And I'm just like, I just want to hug this child and make them feel better. But of course,
it's not the thing that's going to help the child ultimately. Picture. Right. There's always a thing in movies that are really funny. And recently we were watching Young Frankenstein, and there's that moment when the doctor says, I'm going to go in there with the monster. And whatever I do, no matter what happens, if I yell for help, don't let me out. Right. And I think of that as the way when you have a friend there, you say to the friend, okay, keep telling me to breathe, keep telling me to, but don't let me give in. Right. And then of course the first moment that the doctor goes in with the monster, he starts yelling, saying, let me out, let me out. And that's what it feels like as a parent. You go, what have I got myself into? Somebody let me out. Open the hatch. I need out. But you need to maintain.
And especially when you have a highly verbal child too, who starts saying things like, you don't love me, and why are you doing this to me? And you have to remember that to take those as at surface value as there's still strategies for the child to get what they want. So no matter what they say, and don't take it as, oh, I'm a bad parent, because that's not the case. It's that you're doing the best you can do for your child at that moment. And if that's what you have to do, then ignoring is the way to go.
Right. I had a friend years ago, right when Jem was being diagnosed and losing his language, one of her older kids had said to her, I hate you. You're a terrible mom. I hate you. And she called me and she was so upset about it. And I was having a hard time finding the empathy because I didn't know if my child was ever going to speak. And at one point she said to me, she said, oh, Shannon, someday when Jem says this to you, you're just going to see how horrible it is. And I remember thinking, no, the first time that he says to me, Mom, I hate you. You're a terrible mom, I'm going to celebrate because that will mean that, he's got that much language. So, and there have been many occasions now where my child has said, you're a terrible person. You're a horrible mom. I'm going to go live with somebody else. I hate you. And, if in the moment it's an attention thing, I say nothing. But if it isn't one of those things, I say, oh, that's such good talking. Good talking. Because which is probably the worst thing in the world, but I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that he can say that, and we take our blessings where we can get them. Okay, I digress. But so, what else do we want to talk about?
Escape, and I knew we're focusing on extinction here, but it works in all of these situations. So again, the extinction for escape, we call it escape extinction, where you just don't allow escape.
Yeah.
So you give the demand, and the child, screams, and or usually the function is that the child screams, gets out of the task.
Right.
In this case, you screams, you just still sit there with the task, whatever it is, or the demand, and you wait. And a lot of times it's just standing there. If you tell your child, okay, you need to pick up your toys, and throws himself on the ground and starts yelling, like, I'll wait.
Right. Right.
Pick up your toys, and then and we can go into physically prompting the child to do so, of course, as well. So, but it's just following through.
Right.
It's following through with what you say you want your child to do. Following through with it.
And one thing I just want to add to that is that it's so important with escape. I think that you ask questions of the people that you're working with about how to physically prompt in a safe way when the child is being really rebellious. Because if you're asking the child to pick up the toys and you're going to physically prompt it and they're not wanting to, they're going to be kicking and screaming, and you're doing the hand over hand thing of forcing them to pick up the thing, so they're not really picking it up, but you're doing it. Thank you for playing with me.
No problem.
And you're having to fight off basically a Tasmanian devil who's sprouted 16 arms and is a whirling dervish. And it can be really, really difficult and frustrating. The child, if they don't want to get in the bath, and they'll engage in anything in the world to escape the bath, and you still have to get them in the water, but you have to be safe for you and safe for them, and especially where water is concerned. Another case where you don't want to be messing around, make sure that you've got reinforcements, make sure that you've talked to the experts that you're working with about how do I physically deal with this so that nobody gets hurt.
Exactly. And a whole nother topic is antecedent modifications.
Yes.
So changing things before, and for escape maintain behaviors, it may be a really important component to actually do something like demand fading. Yeah. So if it's the bath, just sticking one foot in.
Yeah.
Sticking one foot in the bath, and then we're like, great, we've made progress.
Right.
And like I said, that's a whole nother topic, a whole nother hour of discussion.
Absolutely. And we talked earlier this week about replacement behaviors.
Perfect.
So essential that with all of these things that we're giving a child a replacement behavior.
Yes, and that's one of the most important components is, as I mentioned earlier, differentially reinforcing the replacement behavior or an appropriate behavior. So that itself is a consequence manipulation, because you're providing extinction for what the child would normally get.
Right. So if the child was biting to get out of the bath, right, and the function of the behavior was to escape the bath, and now you're not allowing that, but you've taught the replacement behavior of you have to ask for, can I wait a minute, right? So now you want to make sure that you really reinforce when the child says, can I wait a minute, by giving them the minute.
Exactly.
That they get to escape for it by having done the replacement behavior, but eventually they do have to get in the bath. And maybe it's just stick the, all right, but that all you have to do is stick your foot in now and working your way up.
And it's really important to also remember in those situations that, you want to, like I said, really reinforce these, but also not reinforce these behaviors if they're occurring right at the same time as the behavior. So a lot of times, the child will bite you and you'll say, ask for a minute.
Right.
And what the child learns in that situation is like, I bite, I'm prompted to do the right behavior, and then I do it and I get out of it.
Right.
So it's just
and
a chain.
We just had a question that had come in about a parent saying, my child will engage in different stereotypy behaviors. Then the aide says, do you want a break? And then the child says yes, and the child gets the break. And Dr. Najdowski was saying, make sure that they're asking if he wants a break before that stereotypy occurs, so that we don't muddy it up. It has to be clear.
Exactly.
Okay.
One last for sensory or for automatically reinforced behaviors, we often use something called sensory extinction, and this is a little bit different than providing like a consequence, but you actually change the environment so that if it was tapping or knocking was the behavior, you put a pad down, and so that sound just doesn't happen anymore. A lot of times you'll see children with glasses on, so they can't poke their eyes or something like that. If children are engaging in a lot of like skin scratching, that's automatically reinforcing, just putting long sleeves on often blocks that, and so it's we call that sensory extinction. Again, another form of extinction.
Gosh, so many things to talk about, and we rushed you, and I appreciate you going through it so quick. We're pretty much out of time, so I want to thank you for being here and going through all this. We, as I mentioned earlier, next week we're only doing shows on Tuesday and Wednesday, so it will be 2 weeks before we see you, and then by then I will have no hair, which will be very exciting.
That is exciting.
But in any case, it's a time for us to end the show, and I want to remind everybody that as this conversation ends, the bigger conversation continues, and Emily's starting to show you some of the different ways you can be in touch. And if there's anything that Angela was talking about that you want more information about, then you absolutely can email us here at the show, and we will get that to Angela for her to be able to answer for you. So just another way that you can interact with us. We are back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern time. Very exciting show tomorrow that we're thrilled. For the first time, we're going to have the parents from the A Word in with us.
That's so great.
And in addition to that, we're also having Nick Yates, who is a young man who recovered from autism. He is so inspirational. And he had heard about the A Word family and got an opportunity to meet with the parents. And I do think that for every parent getting an opportunity to meet a recovered person, it's life-changing. And so we're going to talk about that and more tomorrow. Really exciting show. And then also want to remind everybody that on Tuesday, it is World Autism Awareness Day. We will be lighting it up blue here at the studio, and I certainly will be lighting it up blue at home, and we hope that you will too. We're hopefully going to be talking to a lot of people around the world about the state of autism where they are. So we hope you'll join us on Tuesday, and then we will have a live show on Wednesday, but those are the only 2 live shows we'll be doing next week because we've got so many other events. We've got to go to the red carpet for the story of Luke, and then we're also going to the military fundraiser for ACT Today next week. So a lot of fun things happening here. We hope you'll continue to write in and talk to us. We will be back tomorrow morning. Very exciting show. Until then, I hope that you will please remember to give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now. We'll see you tomorrow.